Welcome, everyone. I'm Tony Infanti, and in my day job, I teach at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. But for the ABA tax section, I'm currently serving as the vice chair for Pro Bono and Outreach. And we have a great panel here for you to talk about the Christine Brunswick Fellowship that the ABA tax section offers. And I'm going to introduce everyone just really, really briefly so that we can spend the most time having them convey information to you. And I'm going to introduce them kind of in reverse order so that we end up with the people who are going to start talking to you first. So we have Shailana Dunwall and Catherine Sullivan, who are both former fellows and are going to talk to you about the fellow experience, going through the process of applying for the fellowship, working, all of that fun stuff. Ty Hansen, who's on the staff at the ABA tax section, is going to talk to you about kind of the administrative aspects of things. And then to kick it off, like I said, we're going in reverse, Meg Newman and Susan Morgenstern are going to give you kind of a general overview of the fellowship, an overview of the process, and basic information. So I will turn it over to Meg and Susan.
Great. Well, I am Meg Newman, and I am counsel for the tax section. I worked at an LATC before I came here, and a law firm before that. So I have some sense of sort of the journey of doing public interest tax law. And so I love this program. It's a great program. It was started in 2008, and the goal of the fellowship is really to provide a path to practicing public interest tax law as a career. There aren't a lot of those. If you've started your career search in this area, you might have noticed that. But there's definitely a need for lawyers in this area. It just sometimes the need and the sort of open funding for positions don't always line up in the public interest field. So we're trying to close that gap a bit through this fellowship and another one that we just started. But this one is really geared towards people like yourselves, people who are graduating from JD programs or LLM and tax programs, or maybe they clerked at the tax court like Catherine did, which she can tell you about later. Or maybe they've practiced for a couple years and are looking to switch to do public interest tax law. So that's one side of the coin. And, we'll talk later, but, and you'll hear from some of our fellows later, but we've had a lot of success in setting people on a path to continue practicing in public interest tax or practicing tax generally, and then, having a robust pro bono practice. So those are both, sort of the goals of the program on the side of the fellows. And then in terms of our host organizations, the goal there is to provide more people power, more attorneys to assist host organizations in meeting the needs of their client base, and then also expanding the work that they do through strategic projects. And so part of the fellowship is doing sort of the day-to-day work of the organization. Mohit gave us an example of something more transactional. Most of our fellows do more controversy-related work, similar to what you would do at an LATC in law school. So do some client representation, but then everyone also does something that's sort of like a more sustainable, sort of longer-term project. Over the course of the 2-year fellowship, they'll complete the project. And that can be something that's more outreach related, more training related. There are a bunch of examples. If you go through the website, and I'll drop the link to the fellowship page when I stop talking, because multitasking is hard. If you click on the sort of like hyperlinks of the names there, you can see some examples of prior projects. I would encourage you not to do the same ones if you would like a better chance of getting it. But it'll give you an idea of some cool things that people have done in the past.
But I think it's an opportunity when I think about this, I think about it as an opportunity to think about what do you find particularly interesting in your cases now? Is there an issue that's popped out at you and you think to yourself, this is really vexing. I bet there are a bunch of other people with a similar issue. I bet there are systemic proposals that I could think about. So this is your chance to sort of play with the issue, play in the sandbox of that issue, and think about, if I ran the IRS, or if I were litigating these cases in U.S. tax court or U.S. district court, or in the courts of appeals, the court of federal claims, whatever your forum, how do I build this issue and come up with change that makes sense for this clientele? So it's a chance to sort of tickle your brain cells in that way, and also interest not only your host organization, but the community partners with which your host organization may be engaging. So it's a way to do coalition building as well. And I find that aspect of this program to be especially intriguing.
Yeah, I was going to touch on this same or similar topic as well. One of the benefits of the fellowship is that, you know, obviously it's funded and hosted through us, the American Bar Association tax section. And we do a lot of sort of convening of people who work at LHCs across the country. So it's a really good opportunity to meet other people doing this kind of work, both in terms of just like feeling less like you're doing something random that nobody else does from law school. And also just to meet inspiring, interesting people from around the country. And then, of course, that's a great resource if you have an actual substantive question about tax law. So we run a very active listserv, and you know, you can join it now if you want. Law student members of the tax section can join committees you can join the ABA for free, you can join the tax section for free, you can join committees for free, as many as you want. We have 36 of them. It's a lot. But most relevant here is the Pro Bono and Tax Clinics Committee, which has over 1,000 members on it. And those are people practicing this kind of work or doing it as a pro bono project if they're, you know, if they're working in private practice. And so you can see just how deep and interesting the community is and this work is if you join the listserv. Maybe send it to a folder so you don't get too overwhelmed. Just well,
but the other thing that does, Meg, is that it creates this sense that really you're not alone. I mean, I'll never forget when I got my first tax case. It was before there was this, it was like 2 or 3 listserv iterations ago. And I'll never forget my first tax case. Nobody else at my legal aid organization had ever handled tax. It was terrifying. And I had nobody to turn to, but there was this listserv, and it creates this instant community, which was wonderful. But it also made me realize that there are lots of other people who are interested in similar issues with whom I could be working. And so that's the other cool, you know, whether you become a fellow or just join this community. That's the other sort of cool feature of this, is that you sort of walk into this, you join this mega family of practitioners who are eager to share their experiences and their research with you. Right. So that's a really cool sort of benefit of the fellowship itself.
That, and also the speaking opportunities. So the Pro Bono and Tax Clinics Committee is very active about putting fellows, you know, to moderate our panels. Shailana and Catherine can both speak to this. So it's great for speaking opportunities, getting yourself out there in front of the whole community for, you know, if you need it for future job searching, or even just to, you know, sort of build your own personal brand. And then and Ty can talk about this, but part of the fellowship is that we pay for our fellows to come to our 3 section meetings each year. So in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring, although the fall one will be virtual, but that's another story. So like we're going to San Diego in January, so that's fun. Yep, that's where Catherine was. And so it's cool to get to go and meet people in person and, you know, present there. So that's part, I think the fellowship is more than just a job. It's like really an opportunity to get involved in a bigger way. So I want to talk really quickly about the timeline for the application process, and then I'm going to turn it to Ty for a couple of specific things because we want to leave time for Catherine and Shailana to talk at the end and for questions. So applications are due in November. I'll put the application form in the chat again if I ever stop talking. And you'll see it in the application that it obviously asks you where your host organization is and some information about them. There's some short essays. They're not too strenuous, we don't think anyway. And you talk a little bit about the project that you would do. You know, the committee really wants to get a sense of what it is that you would do during your fellowship. Like, what are you planning to do during your committee or during your for your project? And it should be something that you've put some thought into, something that's interesting and it may be a little bit different, but is, you know, necessary and helpful to the world. And then the community, there's a selection committee within the ABA tax section, which is mostly low-income tax practitioners or professors like Tony is, And then some people who have robust pro bono practices, but practice at firms or things like that. But definitely people who are pretty senior in their careers or, have been around this work for a long time. And so those folks will review all the applications that come in by the deadline. They'll select several, it sort of varies how many per year finalists among that group. And then for the people who are selected as finalists, the committee talks to the host organizations to make sure that they're prepared to support a fellow. And then in January, we'll do Zoom interviews for those who are selected as finalists. And then we'll make offers later in January for the folks who are selected. We will probably have 2 slots for the 2023-2025 class. Usually it's 2. It varies a little bit year to year, but usually we have 2 slots. And then I would say the last thing is, it sounds like some of you already have, a link to a host organization. If you don't, and that's something that you're looking for and that you want to talk more about, there are definitely host organizations that were at our earlier info session today that are looking for applicants to match with. They may not be in the geographic location you'd like to be in, so that may or may not be helpful to you. But I'm happy to talk to you offline. I'll drop my email in the chat, and my proverbial door, my Zoom door is always open to anyone on the host organization side or on the applicant side that wants to talk through any questions. So feel free to connect with me. I mean, the easiest answer is, if you know where you want to be geographically, you can look up the LATCs there and ask them, hey, would you be interested in having a fellow? But if that's not something that's working out for you, I've talked to plenty of people in the past and helped them break.
Well, but the other thing is that it doesn't necessarily need to be an LATC. It could be.
That's true, right?
Another
you had mentioned earlier, right?
Right, and we've had a number of fellows that have done their fellowship at not LATC organizations, and that brings another dimension to sort of this community, which is important too.
That's right. There needs to be a nexus with tax and low-income people or low-income organizations in some way, the public interest, if you will. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be an LITC. That's a good point.
Or federal income tax, for that matter.
That's true. Just tax law in some way.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pass it to Ty, because I want to make sure we get through what we wanted to discuss, to talk just a little bit about the specifics of how the fellowship works in terms of getting paid, which is always important. And then we'll close out hearing from some fellows.
Great, thanks, Meg. I'll be quick and then turn it over to Catherine and Shalana. So in short, you found your organization, you have this great project in mind, you've gone through the application process, you did the interview, you were selected, hooray, congratulations. And thank you. This is one of my favorite things whenever I have to think about what I do as a day job. This is one of my favorite things I think about because it's really impactful. It helps a lot of people that really need help. But for your purposes, you'd be hosted by this 501c3 nonprofit organization association, and that's who your employer is. That's who's paying your salary. That's who's going to be giving you either an ACH or a check every 2 weeks or whatever the local jurisdiction demands. And the ABA and our endowment funds that association or organization. So we don't pay you directly, rather we pay the association and they would pay you. They are the ones that would have any policies that you'd be beholden to, such as leave policy. They would be the ones that would provide the medical benefits, so we pay for that. So yes, you would have medical insurance. Yes, you would have benefits as if you were an employee at that organization. And in addition, the fellowship provides for student loan interest payments. So if you have any student loans as a result of schooling, the endowment will pay for the interest on those loans while you're in the fellowship for the 2 years. So there's that extra support that is also passed through the organization you'll work for, but it's in addition to the salary and benefits. And as Meg alluded to already, you'd get travel reimbursement and travel costs paid for to come to our 3-section meetings, usually January, May, and September. And yet the fall meeting will be going virtual only, so you'd be able to attend virtually for free, of course. And that's really a great opportunity to meet the other people without having to really foot any of the bill. So I'm happy to answer any direct questions. The salary, if you saw on the application, if you've had a chance to look at it yet, is pegged to the federal judicial clerk salary, which is approximately $57,000 right now. Probably will go up just a little as inflation goes up, but that's the overall base salary. It's not adjusted based on where you are. So it's the same salary if you're in Ohio or in DC or in Maine or wherever you might be located. So happy to answer any questions, but if nothing comes to mind right now, happy to pass it to our two former fellows to give some real life experience with how it went.
Okay, I can start. So I am Catherine Sullivan. I currently work for the IRS Office of Chief Counsel in San Diego, California. And I was a Brunswick Fellow from 2016 to 2018, I believe was my class. It's been a while. And I think that this is great that you guys are showing interest now. I will tell you a little bit about how I became involved in, finding out about this and applying, which was a very short amount of time. But I went to law school, didn't really know what I wanted to do, sort of graduated at a tough time, ended up moving back to California where my family is from, and decided to do an LLM to help because I was thinking about estate planning or something in that field. I had not taken a tax class or worked in an LITC or really knew anything about LITCs. And so to just, get some experience, I started volunteering with a local organization here in San Diego, which was the Legal Aid Society of San Diego. I actually started in their domestic violence clinic, doing, temporary restraining orders. And my husband was actually the one that was in the tax clinic. And so that's where I learned about the LITC there at the Legal Aid Society of San Diego. Since I started to do my LLM, I thought that it would be a good experience to, get some experience in the tax field. Again, not really thinking that controversy was something that I was interested in or really knew anything about. And so through my volunteer work there while I was going to school, it happened to be mentioned to us while we were being, we had a site review of our LITC, and someone mentioned the fellowship and thought that it would be a good opportunity. So we quickly, I think this was maybe in end of October, quickly researched this, and I thought that it might be a good opportunity because I was really enjoying the work at the LITC. And so in sort of picking my project or, trying to develop a specific focus for my application and my project, because we are in San Diego, we have a fairly large veteran population and especially a homeless veteran population. The Legal Aid Society did have some connections with other organizations in San Diego that were geared towards veterans as well as the homeless population. Our internal systems tracked for veteran status, so that made it easy to identify how many current clients we had and what sort of the need was there. And kind of built a focus around connecting more to veteran organizations. And then we had also started or were looking into doing some sort of financial counseling aspect in our clinic at the time. And so that was also sort of a secondary focus of my project, was to build this sort of financial counseling that was available to all of our clients. But we thought that it was a good component for, or, something to offer to LITC clients to let them know about budgeting, talk to them about credit reports, reading credit reports. We pulled credit reports for them, talked about building credit, et cetera. So that was sort of my focus of my of my project. And And then I guess just in benefits, I know that everyone talked about, the experience of coming to the ABA meetings, which it was a great experience. I met so many people. And I really think that the fellowship is what helped me get my job after the fellowship, which was to clerk at the tax court with a special trial judge. And that was a great experience. I was there for almost 2.5 years, and then was fortunate enough to move to the IRS, where I am now. So I've sort of been on all sides of the controversy field, which is, again, not something that I ever thought that I would do. But here I am, and I just love it. And if anyone has any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I will let Shailana talk about her experience, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, so my fellowship actually ended, I think, a week ago, maybe 6 days, something like that. So today is the first time I've been called a former fellow, and it felt kind of weird right at first. So I started in 2020. I'm at Legal Aid of Nebraska. So if any of you want to come to Nebraska, we're happy to have another fellow. My project originally was to talk and try and build community awareness of earned income tax credit, especially in rural areas. The earned income tax credit uptake in Nebraska varies year to year, but generally between 75 and 80%, and that's pretty standard across the country. There's a lot of factors that can make an individual more or less likely to receive the tax credits they're eligible for. Rural uptake is pretty uncommon, or significantly less common. I think about 10 or 12%. I had the stats all memorized for my interview, but that was 2.5 years ago. And so I wanted to try and reach out to the community leaders in all of the small towns, which is where half the population of my state lives, and let them know about these programs and credits and opportunities, and try and do some education about, even if you don't have a filing requirement, it can be incredibly beneficial for your family to go ahead and file, even though it seems like a hassle. Trying to find childcare, maybe these forms can be very intimidating, especially if you are a lower income individual who is disproportionately then less educated than the average person. Maybe English isn't your first language. These things all make it harder. And so trying to do that. But I started in 2020. And so traveling around the state and doing lots of in-person meetings was not something that was being done. So we kind of shifted gears a little bit. I ended up doing a lot of work educating and doing virtual presentations on the expanded child tax credit, on stimulus payments and how to get your stimulus payment if you didn't get it, what to do if your ex got your stimulus payment, how to manage, I should have gotten advanced child tax credit, I'm getting it and I know I shouldn't be, all of those things, which did end up, I think, probably having an increase in EITC uptake, just because a lot of these things, you got the credits by filing your taxes. So even though people maybe weren't specifically doing it to get the EITC, the the stimulus payments and then the advanced child tax credit, because it was a kind of standalone payment and everybody knew about it. There was a lot of knowledge and people were very interested in getting theirs, which, I mean, fair enough. I was very excited to get my stimulus payments. So there was, with the increased awareness, a lot of people calling our office like, I can get this and I think I'm supposed to. And so figuring that out, worked with our local VITA site to get a lot of tax returns filed for people who normally don't file. Many of them normally just don't have a filing requirement. But, you know, for people who are on disability, you know, this was 2021 was the first year and might be the only year that they could get the child tax credit. And so, you know, for those families, it was huge. So it was pretty great.
Well, thank you so much. I know we're a little over time, but we're happy to stay for as long as folks need with any questions that you might have. You know, feel free to just throw them out now. Does anyone have questions, thoughts?
I'll also drop my email in the chat in case anything comes up. I know like Meg is a great resource, Ty's a great resource, but sometimes it's intimidating to talk to like authority people. I have no say in your application. I'm probably never gonna see it. And I went through this process pretty recently. So if you have what feels like a dumb question, feel free to reach out, but also there are no dumb questions.
And I know this was said before, but I think that it would be a good opportunity to go on the ABA website and look at the information about past fellows, because they do talk about their projects. And while I don't encourage you, like Meg said, to choose the same project, it can be difficult to kind of try to figure out a project or sort of narrow a focus. So it's helpful to see what people have done in the past and maybe use that to help, you know, either cone down your idea or focus on something that you've seen either through volunteer work or, you know, in law school, or something you're just interested in. That might be something to focus on as a project.
And that's where engaging with the host organization or interviewing the host organization could be really helpful to make sure they have an interest in sort of expanding their tax practice and that their interests align with your interests.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
All right, well, we won't take up any more of your time, but if you do have any questions, you know, like we said, reach out, and thank you so much for joining us today and for your interest.
Thanks for hosting. And yeah, I definitely might have questions later on. So even though I can't think of them now, thanks for the email addresses.
Awesome. All right, well, take care, everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.